If you walk into the back corner of Universal Studios Florida today, you'll end up in Diagon Alley, one of the most detailed and immersive lands ever built. What you won't find is any trace of what used to sit there. For more than 2 decades, this exact patch of land was a working harbor called Amity Island, complete with a massive lagoon, a fleet of tour boats, a live performer stationed on every single one, and a mechanical great white shark about the size of a school bus. All of that was Jaws, and has a strange reputation. Ask longtime fans, and plenty of them will tell you it was one of the best theme park attractions ever made. Ask the people who actually had to build and run it, and you'll hear about a ride that broke down almost every single day, dragged Universal into a lawsuit with its own contractor, sat closed for 3 years, and burned through millions of dollars in natural gas just to keep operating. Both of those things are true at the same time, and once you understand why the ride was so beloved and so miserable to keep running, you also understand why Universal ripped it all out, and why they'll almost certainly never build anything like it again. The ride didn't start out as a standalone attraction at all. The original version of Jaws was a single scene on the Studio Tour tram ride at Universal Studios Hollywood, where a mechanical shark would lunge at your tram as it passed a lagoon, set to John Williams' score. It worked well enough as a quick thrill that when Universal was planning its Florida park, they decided to blow the idea up into a full 5-minute attraction. When Universal Studios Florida opened on June 7, 1990, Jaws was one of its headline opening day rides, tucked into the Amity Island section that recreated the seaside town from the film. Reported budgets vary, but most sources put the original build in the ballpark of $45 million, which was an enormous sum for a single ride at the time. The premise was simple and clever. You boarded a boat run by Captain Jake's Amity Boat Tours for what was pitched as a scenic cruise around the harbor, past Chief Brody's house and the local businesses, with a skipper reassuring you that there was nothing to worry about, because no shark had been spotted in these waters since the attacks back in 1974. Then, of course, everything went wrong. What followed was 5 minutes of practical, in-your-face spectacle that a lot of people still consider unmatched. A distress call would crackle over the radio from another boat, turn into screaming, and then go silent. From there, the shark came for you. A great white that measured around 24 feet long and weighed roughly 3 tons would surge out of the water and slam into the side of the boat, close enough that you could see individual teeth. Universal described the animatronic as lunging with a thrust comparable to a jet engine at takeoff. And whether or not the exact comparison holds up, the thing absolutely felt that powerful when it hit. The boat would flee into a dark boathouse where the shark was waiting, then back out into the harbor toward Bridewell's gas dock, where the skipper's stray grenade would set off a fireball so large and so hot that guests could feel the heat wash over their faces from across the water. The finale sent you past a high-voltage barge, where the shark made one last lunge and bit into a live power cable, electrocuting itself in a shower of sparks and foam right next to the boat. It was loud, wet, and hot, and it put you inside the movie in a way that screens simply cannot replicate. The real secret ingredient, though, was the skipper. Every single boat had a live performer on board, steering the vessel, delivering the narration, reacting to the shark, and aiming the grenade launcher at the right moments. This was a live show running dozens of times a day on a moving vehicle, and a good skipper could turn an already strong ride into something unforgettable. Some played it terrified, some played it as a cocky action hero, and the ad-libs and delivery changed from boat to boat, which gave the attraction a personality that most rides never had. The line, "We'll be shark bait in 10 minutes, became something of a legend among fans. But that live element came with a cost that's easy to overlook. Every boat needed a trained performer on the clock, which meant the ride carried a staffing bill well above a typical attraction, where guests just sit in a vehicle and watch pre-programmed effects fire. When you multiply one performer per boat across a full operating day, across every day of the year, the labor alone starts to look very different from a modern ride that runs on sensors and projectors. For all that ambition, the original 1990 version of Jaws barely functioned. The mechanical sharks had to accelerate from a dead stop to a full lunge in an instant, and the drag that created in the water put enormous strain on the whole system. Effects failed constantly. The ride had to be evacuated so often that it became close to a daily occurrence, and cast members were sometimes reduced to telling guests to imagine the explosions that were supposed to be going off around them. Engineers later found weld cracks forming at the base of the framework that held the ride and its effects together, a sign that the whole thing was tearing itself apart under the stress of its own show. Universal shut the ride down within a couple of months of opening, and ended up in a lawsuit with Ride and Show Engineering, the contractor that built the original system, accusing them of failing to design the attraction properly. Jaws then sat closed for around 3 years, while Universal figured out whether it could even be salvaged. For a ride that had been a marquee part of the park's grand opening, watching it go dark almost immediately was a pretty stunning failure. Rather than give up, Universal decided to rebuild the ride almost from scratch. They brought in the Swiss firm Intamin to redesign the ride system, and the American company Oceaneering, which normally worked on deep sea and offshore engineering, to build new and far more durable sharks. This was Oceaneering's first theme park project, and they'd go on to become one of the biggest names in the industry. To make the show survivable, they simplified some of the most demanding scenes. The original had a moment where the shark bit the boat and spun it a full 180 degrees, which was scrapped in favor of the gas dock explosion. The first finale, where the skipper shot a grenade into the shark's mouth and it burst apart underwater in a cloud of blood and chunks, was swapped for the cleaner electrocution ending. The rebuilt Jaws reopened in 1993, with Roy Scheider and Steven Spielberg among the guests on hand. And this is the version most people actually remember riding. It was far more reliable than the first attempt, but it was never cheap or simple. Outside estimates suggested that between the original build and the overhaul, Universal may have spent somewhere in the neighborhood of $70 million, which is a staggering figure for a single attraction in the early 1990s. The rebuilt ride worked, but it was punishingly expensive to keep running every day. That gas dock fireball wasn't a cheap trick. Reports have pegged the cost of the explosion effect at around $2 million a year in natural gas alone, and that's before you count the diesel that powered the boats, a cost that climbed even higher when Universal switched to a more environmentally friendly fuel. Add the live performer on every boat, plus the constant maintenance that a fleet of animatronic sharks and pyrotechnic rigs demands, and you have an attraction that costs a fortune to operate, whether or not every effect fires correctly on a given cycle. The strain showed. In 2005, with fuel prices spiking after Hurricane Katrina, Universal actually pulled Jaws down to seasonal operation, running it only on the busier days to save money. Guests complained loudly enough that the ride returned to full-time operation by 2007. But the episode revealed something important. When money got tight, one of the most beloved rides in the entire park became a line item that Universal looked at cutting, because the daily cost of simply turning it on was so high. Then there's the sheer amount of space it ate up. Jaws wasn't a compact building you could pack with switchbacks and a tight ride system. It was an actual working lagoon, reportedly holding thousands of tons of steel and thousands of miles of electrical wire beneath the water, sitting on a prime chunk of real estate in the middle of the park. For all that land, the ride moved a relatively modest number of guests per hour, compared to what you could fit into the same footprint with a more modern design. A 5-minute boat tour with a live performer can only cycle so many people through in a day. Park attendance kept climbing, guest expectations kept rising, and Universal was staring at an enormous, water-filled plot of land running one aging, expensive, labor-heavy attraction. From a business standpoint, that's an awful lot of acreage tied up in a ride that was getting harder to justify with every passing year, no matter how much people loved it. In December 2011, Universal announced that Jaws and the entire Amity area would close, and on January 2, 2012, the ride ran for the last time. The final voyage went to a small group of guests with a longtime skipper at the helm, and by the next morning, the whole area was walled off and slated for demolition. What replaced it tells you everything about where the industry was heading. On that same footprint, Universal built the Wizarding World of Harry Potter's Diagon Alley, which opened in 2014 and is still considered one of the most impressive themed lands ever created. Its headline ride, Harry Potter and the Escape from Gringotts, is a largely indoor, screen-based attraction that combines projection, motion, and a coaster system to push huge numbers of guests through an enclosed building. There's a nice piece of trivia here, too. The fire-breathing dragon perched on top of Gringotts reportedly draws from the same gas utility connection that once fed the Jaws gas dock explosion. So, in a strange way, a piece of the old ride's infrastructure is still throwing fire over that corner of the park. But the difference in philosophy is stark. Diagon Alley is built around screens, reusable indoor space, and high throughput, while Jaws was built around open water, live labor, and real fire. None of this means Jaws is completely gone from the Universal universe. A full version of the ride is still operating at Universal Studios Japan, where it opened in 2001 and remains hugely popular to this day, complete with its own live skippers and its own wall of fire, and the original shark encounter still lives on as a scene on the Studio Tour tram at Universal Studios Hollywood. The Japan version is a useful reminder that the ride can still work and still pull big crowds when a park fully commits to running it. That installation was built in a different era of park economics, though, and even Universal Japan has spent recent years adding newer, screen-driven headliners like Super Nintendo World around it. Back in Florida, Universal has kept the memory alive in smaller ways, including a Bruce the Shark photo op where fans can pose with a great white hanging from a hook. And in 2025, with the film hitting its 50th anniversary, Universal Orlando leaned into Amity nostalgia with themed food, merchandise, and photo spots. Fans have never stopped asking for the ride to come back, and every construction permit filed in the park kicks the rumors right back into gear, even though Universal has never actually confirmed any plans to rebuild it. But keeping Bruce around as a photo prop, and actually recreating a working lagoon full of 3-ton mechanical sharks, are two very different things. Everything that made Jaws special, the open water, the real fire, the live skipper on every boat, the giant practical animatronics, is also the exact set of features that makes it a poor fit for how theme parks operate now. Modern parks chase attractions that run on screens and sensors, fit into reusable indoor buildings, move large crowds efficiently, and don't need a performer stationed on every vehicle or $2 million of gas a year to stay open. Jaws was the last great example of the opposite approach, and that's precisely why it's so unlikely we'll ever see anything like it again. Anyway, thanks so much for sticking with me all the way to the end of this one. It really does mean a lot. If you're in the mood for another one of my videos, there should be one popping up on screen right about now. And if you've been enjoying these, I'm slowly creeping toward that 1,000 subscriber mark, which is the point where I can finally start earning any ad revenue at all. So every sub really does help more than you'd think.